All right, guys, here we go. Let's talk about where we are with alignment and getting our lesson plans to the rigor that we need our kids to be at. Um, so I went ahead and I put the clusters at the top per what we talked about this week. The idea is that we're building on these clusters, and that by this point, you're picking a text like you guys picked "Thank you, ma'am." And you're saying, okay, authentically, how do these fit together in "Thank you, ma'am"? And what do I need to be pulling for "Thank you, ma'am"? That's part of the thought. And then the other thought is, and what is highly tested? What are the areas that we've really got to hit? And then what are the areas that are scaffolding for greater thinking? So vocabulary is scaffolding for greater thinking, but are you hitting all of those elements that are going to be used in testing the vocab? So as they're pulling vocab words, are they looking for the authentic context clues, including all of these types of context clues, definitions, analogies, examples, cause and effect, and contrast? Are we pulling, are they able to see different types of context clues? And have you found places in their text that do that? Are they able to identify when a word has a root or affix that is helpful? And are they having the discussions about how that helps them define that word? And then are they using their new vocabulary in the work they create? So as they're pulling words from their reading, are they creating a bank that they can go back and use for the new vocabulary and what they're actually writing and creating and in the discussions they're having? Okay, so that should all be embedded within what you're doing every week, but it's a skill that they're practicing over and over within the authentic understanding of a text. Then we come down here and we're looking, okay, making, correcting, and confirming predictions. This is not tested. This is a great skill to have. It's nice, but it's not something that's absolutely necessary. Making connections to self, text, and society. The big one here is text to text. If you've got a text like "Thank you, ma'am," where it's highly dependent on them understanding the historical nature that it's coming out of, then what is the satellite text that you're using to give them that context? That's where those text to text connections need to come in. And with every main text, you need to have a satellite text that helps them understand where it's coming from or what it's connecting to. Okay. Our students determining key ideas. So we know that how is this tested? Is it tested? If so, what do those question stems look like? Are they creating new understanding? We know this is not tested, but this is that high level thinking where they coming creating their own ideas. Okay. Are they using evidence in their responses? We know that that is all the way through. We know that having to use implicit evidence that you're inferring from to make your own responses is all the way through. So that should be every single day where you're pulling from your text that you've chosen the places where implicit evidence is helping them get to the teak that you're working on. Okay. Our students paraphrasing and summarizing text. The only way this is tested is best summary, but it's also a great skill for them to use as they're reading for their comprehension. Our students responding orally and reply and in writing, and are they using vocabulary, tone, voice, register? So are you having them write in response to the reading? Are you having them look at the text as mentor writing text? And then are you having them write to develop not only their writing skills, but to develop the things that you just talked about in reading? You've said, let's look at what this author's doing. Now, if they have to turn around and do that, then they're really understanding what the author's doing. So, how are we integrating that reading and writing? Are students considering the genre as they read, including realistic fiction, adventure? So, what type of fiction is "Thank You, Ma'am"? Okay, and from that, then, or is it narrative nonfiction? And then from that, what do we need to know? And what are the things that we should, because it's that type of fiction, and are they able to identify those things that are important for that type of fiction? Are students analyzing how characters' qualities influence events and resolution of conflict? So exactly how are we looking at what the characters are doing? Are we just looking at characters? Or are we looking at how the characters are moving the story, specifically, and how the characters are creating conflict? All right, our students analyzing plot elements. So are they able to go through as they're talking and talk about why the exposition is the exposition, what's important in the exposition, what's the inciting event, what does that make the characters do, what's the response to that that creates the rising action, how does the rising action via the characters build on one another so we get to the climax? After the climax, how do the characters react, and what's that downward chain of what the characters are doing and saying and thinking with each other that's creating the conflicts for the falling action? How does the falling action lead to the resolution? What are the conflicts? And then to this, we're adding, okay, and when we get to this, foreshadowing suspense. So seventh grade really should be a year that's sort of high in mystery and sort of high in these stories that have foreshadowing and suspense, because that's sort of the new skill that we're teaching them. And are the students analyzing how the setting influences the characters and plot development? This is super important in historical fiction. It's super important in any of the genres where we're having to understand that that's where it comes out of. So we're looking through and we're saying, okay, so now we've picked a text, and we know that we're working on focusing on this certain cluster within the context of the other clusters that we've built. And what are we going to do? So I know we're looking at all of that as we lay out our objectives. And what I'm seeing when I lay out your objectives, or what I'm looking for, is there a build so that by the end of the week, they are analyzing a text at a higher level than they were the week before? And are all of the skills that we're working, or the skills that we selected to work on this week, that are embedded in being able to do that, are those skills being worked and developed? So look at what you've got. You're going to analyze, you're going to analyze, you're going to analyze. We've already talked about writing. You guys had that conversation with Bryn today. We know we're going to a more embedded form of writing that will support our reading and be better tier 1 instruction. So we know we're moving to that. So these independent days of writing will no longer be. And then here at the end, what have you got them doing? You have them writing a short story. And you're doing that to use the things that you talked about, using setting and character, intentional character and setting development. And then you're incorporating the sentence structures that you had here. So are they using the sentences intentionally based on the organizational patterns that they want to use in their short story? So I'm seeing a development. I'm seeing you say, okay, we're going to analyze this text here. We're going to analyze this text here. We're going to analyze this text here. I think there's some things that have been left out that were important that we could work when we restructure the writing. But in general, I am seeing you develop and then have to write in response to what you're developing, so that they're getting that to a higher level. And as they saw Langston Hughes to create the short story, now they are creating a short story, that higher level. So I'm seeing that flow. There's places to improve. So that's not my concern. Here's my concern. When we go to the bottom, look what you said you were going to do Monday. We will analyze how foreshadowing and suspense advance the plot. Now look at your success criteria. I know I'm successful when I can define and identify foreshadowing in a story. Two completely different things. They need to analyze a piece of the story for foreshadowing. And foreshadowing is a big one. You can't just throw it in anywhere. It has to be intentional to the plot. Like you have to do that when you have a text that really reflects foreshadowing. Okay? So how are you doing that? You'll answer the following question. At what point in the story did you feel suspense about the outcome of the conflicts? What specific plot events helped to create that suspense and move the plot along? This doesn't have anything to do with foreshadowing. This has suspense. And is "Thank You, Ma'am" a suspenseful story? So there's not alignment down on that lesson plan. We're not getting them to, there's no way that this success criteria is telling me, yes, my students can analyze foreshadowing within a story. Okay. So, and suspense, foreshadowing, suspense. So no. All right. Now the next one. We will analyze how setting influences character and plot development. Okay. So we come down here. I will know I'm successful when I can identify and explain the time and place Langston Hughes story, "Thank You, Ma'am," took place. That's not what they're asking. It doesn't matter if they can tell you when it took place. What you need to be asking is, how did where Langston Hughes was coming from, how did his perspective inspire this story? What was it about the world around him that made him choose to write "Thank You, Ma'am" the way he did? So again, what we're doing for our success criteria, what we're doing for our performance task, and look at the performance task. Teacher will remind students that the previous day they learned about foreshadowing and suspense, and students will find 3 settings in which details foreshadow events. That performance task has absolutely nothing to do with this success criteria, nor does it have anything to do with your actual objective for the day. Now look at Wednesday. We will analyze how characters' qualities influence events and resolution of the conflict. Okay, let's come down here and see if at the end of the day, we're going to be able to check that. I will know I am successful when I can correctly infer how an element of a character influenced or affected the plot or resolution of a story. You come here and how you're doing it. Okay, students will then answer a 4-question multiple choice stemmed quiz. All right, so those are aligned. If I do this success criteria, if I can check this, then I will know if my students are capable of doing this. Now, my only thing is, we got it a little bit mixed up. This is the performance task. I will know I'm successful when I can correctly infer how an element of character influenced or affected the plot, or that's your performance task. Your success criteria is when you look at this exemplar, how do you know they're successful? One, they chose the right answer that identified the how the character was moving, and two, they were able to explain how that connected. We have the actual, this one has the actual exemplar. Let me get to Duty's lesson plan real quick. And I want to pull the exemplar because I want to show you how you would write the success criteria for this. Okay. So if I get on Duty's lesson plan, which has the exemplar, I can look at it and go, okay, number one, what are they going to be able to do? Number one, they're going to be able to answer a question about that answer a question that ties the character to how they're moving forward the plot. And number two, they're going to be able to describe their reasoning and thinking for doing so. If they can do those two things, then I know that they can do what I'm asking them to do. So those two things, can they correctly identify how the characters are influencing the plot? And two, can they then explain their reasoning? Now, and that is an inference. And I want you to look at how well aligned that is. Okay. So she says exactly what she's doing. Can I correctly infer how an element of character influenced or affected the plot? That's what you're asking them to do when you're telling them to explain their thinking. So yes, that is measurable. Yes, I can do it. Again, the only thing I would say is this is what should go in your performance task. And then the success criteria is the checklist of how you'll know when they complete that exemplar that they've gotten there. Okay, one more. We will write short stories that describe setting, character development, and plot using intentional sentence structures. Then here, the performance task is just about the sentences. So the performance task could be online thinking because you're having to defend what you're doing, but it's only choosing this one little piece versus what the actual text is, which is this is where you're asking them to synthesize. So I got some clarification on this because I've gotten a couple different answers. So I went to Dr. White and I said, look, when we're doing this, where we're synthesizing all the information, the obvious answer is there should be a rubric. And are the kids able to score on the rubric? And the final answer I got was yes. In this case, our performance task may not be a 5-second clip. If we're authentically writing, our performance task can be a rubric. And are the kids scoring on the rubric? So in this case, I know that's what you guys were pushing for. That's what Burke was pushing for originally. And I agree with that. So we got some clarification on that, and we can do that instead of trying to make up some inauthentic little task. So that's something we'll restructure as we do our new embedded writing. Okay. So these two can't stick for the week. We can't stick with an identify. Okay. We've got to make these two stronger. Also, we need, before you put these on the board, you need your performance task to be right for what you put on your board. So your performance task, what you have on this success criteria, once you change these and put these at an analysis level and use those analysis stems for what they're needing to do, that needs to move up here. Yes, for next week, this needs to change and that needs to move up. And then you need to have your success criteria for you to know. Now that doesn't have to change. That's not going on your board for your kids, but you need to know, I'm going to check this, check this, check this. And one of the reasons this is getting missed is, notice Ms. Duty has the exemplar. And the exemplar is how you define your success criteria. If you don't actually do the exemplar, then you haven't thought through, how am I going to check that my kids are successful? So that's why we're doing it this way. Your first step is laying out those objectives. What do we need to teach? And then, do you have your text? Grab your text. This is the text. This is the central text we want to use. Satellite text will pop out as you go back and build your TEKS. Okay. Now I'm going to lay out my objectives. Based on the TEKS, the ones that I know are the most important, the ones that I know are the highest level rigor, I'm going to build. So they're synthesizing at a greater level. Then we're going to embed the writing around that. Now, if that's what my objective is, next, how am I going to check that they got that at the level that I said, which is usually analysis? So I'm going to lay out that performance task. And then I'm going to go through, I'm going to do that performance task. That's my that's my exemplar. And as I do my exemplar, I'm going to say, okay, this is what they have to do so that I know they're doing this. They got to go check, check, check. And your success criteria becomes that checklist. And then you go back and you create your lesson to say, okay, I noticed all these things that my kids are going to have to do. In my lesson, I got to make sure I'm getting them to be able to do all those things. All right, we're going to keep working this because this is where we find the rigor. When we align it correctly in the first place, That's where we get to the fact that our days actually get our kids to the level of thinking that we say that we're going to get them to. You guys are working so hard. I couldn't ask for a more hardworking team, and I appreciate all you're doing. My job is to push you, and I'm going to keep pushing you because we have got to build the rigor that we've never built before. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Thank you.